All right. Hi, everyone. This is the Finance Subcommittee meeting. Today is May 2nd, and it is now 5:34. Counselor Walsh is joining, but I just want us to introduce ourselves because there's a couple people or one person, I don't really know who it is. So we'll start with you, Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Hackett, the Deputy Capital for the city.
All right, Lisa,
Lisa D'Souza, Deputy City Solicitor.
Pat Burns,
Pat Burns, City Comptroller.
Chris Caputo,
I'm Chris Caputo. I'm the city's treasurer collector.
Sierra Hanlon.
I'm Kira Hanlon. I'm a budget analyst
Kira.
for the city.
Oh, Kira. Okay. Kathy Breck.
I am Kathy Breck, Deputy City Solicitor for the City Law Department.
Okay. Zeta Govan.
Hi, I'm Zeta Govan. I'm Ward 8 City Councilor.
Thank you. Did I call Lisa already? Lisa D'Souza? I
Yes.
did. Okay. I'm sorry, Lisa. I must want to hear from you more. Paul Tuthill. Who's a reporter. And then we have Councilors Hurst, Letterman, Councilor Allen, Councilor Walsh, Councilor Govan already introduced herself, but I think that I wanted to move the meeting along. I didn't know Cara or Sierra.
It's Kira.
Kira. Okay, Kira. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. I am gonna take some of the items out of order today because I do want to talk about the bond, the pension obligation bond. And so I'll take a couple out of order, but I'm gonna start with Pat Burns on the March revenue versus expenditure report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight I'll be presenting the March Revenue Expenditure Report, which represents the 3/4 point of the fiscal year. Through this point, we have collected $591 million in revenue, or 76% of the budget. And we've spent $568 million, or 73% of the budget. We've been talking about the shortfalls in the gasoline budgets for a few departments, and you'll see later on in the agenda, there are 2 orders, one for the fire department and one for code enforcement to address budget shortfalls they're going to have.
So are you taking that out of the free cash that we currently have, the 16 million, or that's where you're proposing?
These
Actually,
2 particular orders are coming out of, I believe, their personal services salaries account.
Yes. For the gasoline transfers, they're coming out of the salary savings in the account, but we do have a couple unrelated to gasoline that will be transferring out of free cash.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Pat on the revenue versus expenditure report?
Pat, yeah, please. Could I ask him a question?
Sure.
Thank you. So Pat, I'm not looking at the report. I'm just asking you this. I didn't bring the report up yet, but are you projecting any bad news in the next quarter, or will it just be more overage in the gas account, et cetera? Or is there anything you have concerns about in the fourth quarter?
Well, there's a few orders outside of the gasoline on tonight's agenda. One actually is directly related to my department, and that is for the Medicaid reimbursement. We have a contract with the University of Massachusetts, and they, along with the school department, submit Medicaid claims, and we receive revenue, and they receive a 2.5% commission on the revenue. So it's kind of a good news, bad news that the revenue is going to be much higher this year than anticipated. So in turn, we're going to need $75,000 to fund that account through the end of the fiscal year, but we're projecting to receive approximately 6 million in revenue, and that number is usually closer to 3.5 million. So I think a lot of this has to do with the pandemic and the claims not being processed as timely. So we're catching up with that in fiscal year 22. So that's really the big item tonight, and that, as Counselor Whitfield pointed out, is coming from free cash. That 75,000 is proposed to come from free cash.
Okay. Who keeps track? I mean, I know you all do in a way, but who has the official number on free cash? You or Lindsay or?
Right now, the free cash amount is 16,131,931. The three orders tonight are proposing to use 112,000 in total. So that will adjust the number down to $16,019,931.
Okay, great. Thanks for the info. Appreciate it. I'm all set.
Thank you.
Here.
And thank you for joining. You're on the finance team along with Councilor Govan. So thank you for being here always. I just wanted to move, and I'm going to take item number 13 out of order, the bond authorization pension obligation for 755 million. I kind of wanted to go over the Rule 20 report. So Pat, you're still on the floor for that, just to like go over what this is telling us.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for my spelling error.
That's okay. That's okay.
I think it's
Everybody
time for me to
wrong at
retire.
one time or another.
The report I put together tonight is addressing the costs of issuing the debt, and it is a projection because we won't know the actual interest rate or term of the debt until we actually finalize and go to sale at the market. So what I did is I asked our financial advisors, Hilltop Securities, to provide me with 6 different schedules, which we have discussed where the interest rate and the term could fall into. So that's what I'm presenting in my report. I can go through each scenario. Basically, as the interest rate goes up, the interest cost goes up. And if we push out the years, then the interest expense also goes up. The principal will always stay the same. We're hoping naturally to get the lowest interest rate, but the market will dictate that. So at this point, in our conversations with our financial advisor, these are the 6 most likely scenarios that we'll run into when we go to market. So you can see that the costs are going to vary based on where we end up landing.
And Pat, what is that date again that the Federal Reserves meet? Or
I believe they're meeting this week. I think
Okay.
it's the 5th and the 6th. And they're talking about increasing the interest rate a 0.5 point. So that's already factored into these rates that's going to happen.
Okay, and the question, I don't know if this is for you or for Lindsay, but I remember when we were talking about our pension obligation before, we had this great schedule and it was supposed to end around 2030 something. And we were scheduled to put this great amount in there and it was gonna resolve the situation or attempt to resolve the situation. Can you give me details on that scenario, you or Lindsay?
Yes, the schedule we're presently on has us fully funding the system by 2033. And that schedule has built in that we're going to increase the payments every year, 9.2%. So that's a large percentage every year. The
And
idea
what-
here is to is to find a way to both fund the system, but at the same time, save money so that we can use it for other services. And that was the whole strategy with looking to do pension obligation bonds, and hopefully we can get to the point where it's feasible, but the interest rate is a lot higher than when we started. We were hoping to get something at the 3% range, not
So
4.5%.
Okay, what is the amount that we put into the pension obligation this year?
This year, the 3 members units put in $85 million. So the city itself, along, not including the school department, paid $51 million. So that would go up by 9.2% next year. And I think Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that gets us to about 55 million.
Yeah, I have actually the FY23 number up right here. Yes, I have 56.4 million for FY23. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Yes.
and it was 51.7 this year,
Yeah.
0.5.
Yep.
Okay, and so how much, hold on, what am I thinking?
Yeah, and that includes the 200 we take out for the grant. So you're right, Pat. 52.7 or 51.7 was FY22.
Was FY 22?
Mhm.
And then 56, less roughly 56 million next
Yeah,
year?
over a little over 56 million. It's a 9.5% increase overall.
9.5. So what is the payments for the bond obligation?
So that's what I think Pat
pension.
put in the report, right, Pat?
He put
Right,
in the
um,
report
Scenarios.
over time, but I want to know, I want to know whether it will be year 1 and year 2.
Okay, in year 1, in the first scenario, the payment would be 16.4 million.
And why do we get to save that amount of money?
That would be, the first payment would be interest only.
No,
So
no,
we
no,
wouldn't
no.
be paying the principal. So the idea is to take the difference between this interest amount and what we would pay and put that in the reserve fund to guard against any losses in the future, and then build upon that reserve fund.
So the principal is still added to the back end. Is that why the years are extended?
Right, the first year is interest only in order to fund the reserve fund. So if we didn't have the first year as interest only, we could possibly reduce the term by a year, or certainly reduce the payment amounts. But then we
So we're
wouldn't
not
have the
actually
reserve fund.
saving, we're not actually saving a payment. We're just putting it on the back end. Because the message has been that this is a savings in year 1 to the city, and it's a savings off of a payment, but it's not actually a savings because we're still gonna have to pay it one way or the other.
Well, we're gonna be paying less than what we would be paying with that 9.2% increase in the out years. So that's where the real savings is. So the first year, it's kind of a break even so that we can set up that reserve fund.
So is it still a savings if we're paying like extra years? Because you got one that goes out maybe 15, 16 years, and then it keeps going on beyond that.
Yes, that's still a savings, but the saving isn't as much
As much as what?
as much as if we condense it to the
If it was a shorter term.
2037 term.
Say that one more time.
So if we pay it back quicker, then we're gonna save more money, but it's gonna be higher payments in those years. So then we wouldn't have any payments, and let's say if we went out to 2038. So it's kind of like a mortgage. You're gonna pay more, but you're gonna pay it down quicker. So
And the payment option we're looking at is 55 million a year. So first year 16 million, second year is what?
Let's say the first scenario is
Mhm.
the 2037 term. So
Mhm.
the first year would be just the interest at 16.4. And then in 2024, it would be 58 million. And then in 2025, it increases to 60.6 million.
So the payments still increase over
Yes,
time.
yes, but at a lot lower percentage than the 9.2 that,
However, if we get into a recession, which I remember on so many calls, TJ was saying it's inevitable, it's coming, it's inevitable, it's coming. We still are going to have to pay this bond obligation, whereas we can reduce the amount otherwise that goes into the pension fund, correct?
yeah, this is a hard figure. This is debt that we'll have to pay.
And we'll have to pay
A hard
regardless.
liability, we'd call it.
Okay, so that's kind of what concerns me, because I hear a recession is coming, a recession is coming, a recession is coming, but then we're gonna be locked into a payment of 55 million. We're also gambling with investments and things like that, right? So what happens if the market doesn't do well and the return on investment that we were expecting isn't there? What happens in that scenario?
Then we're gonna have both the debt payment and then an unfunded liability payment.
A debt payment and unfunded liability. So if the market tanks, like we've seen in the past, we're gonna have a debt payment and an unfunded liability payment.
Yes.
Okay,
I
so
mean, the other side of that is we have approximately 550 million, or we did on January 1st, in assets in our retirement system. So when the market tanks, those are going to go down also. So that's kind of the other side of the coin. Our payments are from that 9.2% increase. They're going to increase on that too. So
unless you got a smart investor that puts the money in like a GPA account or something like that, or put it in less risky investment options because they see the recession or something like that. But you know, that's a whole nother set of like forecasting, right?
yes.
But hopefully we got a smart enough investment agency or brokerage that sees the recession coming and handle the investments and less risky market options. So that's what the hope would be. But I do understand what you're saying on that end too. But my concern, and I've said it, is that we are gonna have this pension obligation payment regardless of what the market does. But we do have some wiggle room with what we put into the pension if we don't have this obligation. And so that's always been my concern, and it's been my concern because of real world experience, Pat, and you were there too. And you know the layoffs that came with it. It's usually not upper management that are laid off, and furloughs had to be taken. And I seen managers getting raises while I was taking a furlough, and that was crazy to me. So, you know, I have really, really strong reservations about doing this and gambling with taxpayers' dollars. Like, to me, it's a really, 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 really large gamble, and it just doesn't really make logical sense to me. I do understand we're going to save the first year, but it's not really a savings because principal is put on the back year and we still have to pay it. And we're going to put that security money that we have in an account for these purposes. But what if we have other things that are very important to take care of? We won't be able to use the funds that's in this reserve account, or would we?
No, this reserve account will be strictly to fund the pension system in if there's a loss, and that will be.
Like, we have so
dictated
many
with the
problems going
agreement
on in the
with
city of
state.
Springfield. And I mean, I haven't seen a lot of work on the pension like this until we got the report that Springfield was last, and now it's like a big dash to fund it, maybe do half of it or some type of other scenario. But this doesn't make logical sense to me. based on where I see the market trending and headed in the next probably 2 years or so. So I'm just gonna leave that right there and give my colleagues the opportunity to speak. Counselor Hurst?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Pat, just a quick question, piggybacking off of what Councilor Whitfield said. How do we lose on this investment? What does that look like? When we go into the market, where are we in at a fixed rate over the duration? How do we end up losing? I'm a little confused on that.
So the Springfield retirement system, all of our funds, and this was set up when the control board came in, are invested in the PRIT fund, which is the state fund, which contains all of the state retirees and teacher retiree funds. So it's a core fund. And what our schedule currently is predicated on now is that we will receive a 7% return on that. Now, last year we did very well. I believe it was somewhere close to 19%. But so far this year, the fund's down through March, approximately 2%. So really what the goal is to outperform that 7% over the long term. So that's what the fund is predicated on, and that's why we have that 7% rate of return. The retirement board has been reducing that rate of return since I've been on the board, and just about 7 or 8 years ago, that rate of return that we were assuming was close to 8.5%. So we got that down to a much more conservative level, which was a directive from PARAC, which are the oversight of all the retirement systems in Massachusetts.
So I guess my question, Pat, is how, with this investment, if we go into a recession, how do we end up losing? What can you just explain to me what that looks like? I'm having a little trouble understanding what has to happen for us to ultimately lose money.
Like,
So-
what has to happen for us to pay the unfunded liability plus the bond obligation?
So if we put this money in the market and the rate of return is more like 3%, then we're not going to be paying down the amount that was assumed in all of our scenarios. So that will then increase our unfunded liability. So we would have the debt payment and the unfunded liability payment. That right now we just have the unfunded liability payment. So really what we're trying to do is get this at a low interest rate, 4.5%, and then in the market, get back at least 7%. And that's where the savings is predicated upon. And if we don't get that return back, that's why we have that reserve fund. So if we have a few bad years, we can inject that money into the system and then get us back where we're supposed to be, back on our footing again.
So can we pull out and reinvest in the program that we're already in right now, if for some reason it's not looking good, or are we locked in? How does that work?
Now, once we put the money in, we're locked into the PRIT fund with the state. So the board would have to get permission from PARAC and the state legislator to move that money out at that point. And for instance, get our own advisors.
And so that's what we're looking to do now, correct? Is that what we're looking to do now, or no?
No, what we're looking to do now is to put an infusion of funds into the retirement system that will then pay down that unfunded liability that we have now, which will in turn reduce our yearly appropriation payment and save the taxpayers money. Is there risk with it? Yes, there is. And that's kind of why we put this team together and what we've been working on. And ultimately, we're going to make that decision if at the end of the day, the interest rates are favorable and the term we can get into is favorable.
Got it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor Hurst. Counselor Allen?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just couple things that I learned along the way that might be helpful. One is the reason we invest with PRIT, Pension Investment Trust or something, it's a state-run investment, is that's what we have to do. Because of the state of our situation being the poorest funded one, we cannot invest this on our own. Other communities can invest, with how they want if they're not in the situation we're in. But we don't have that choice. We are required to invest with the state. The good news is that it's a well-run fund and it's a balanced fund and it normally gets a great return. But the bad news is, I'm not so sure when you just said, why don't we put it in fixed and all this and that? We don't have it's in PRIT. Now, Pat would know more about it than me, but we don't, it's not like TJ and Pat and Lindsay are making decisions about one investment fund to be with or something. We are required to be in PRIT, and it's a balanced fund that has a mix of different types of risk and reward, as I understand it.
So we're required to be in PRIT because of the Financial Control Board?
Yes, that was a vote that was taken, I believe, back in 2008.
Because I was confused because in West Springfield, they're not required and they don't use the state funded system. They went with their own private investors. So
a lot of the retirement systems maybe will put 50% with PRIT, but then they'll invest the other 50% with their own money managers, and some of them, like West Springfield, have their own money managers that handle all of the funds.
Right. Okay.
And so that was one point I wanted to make. A second point is just that there's no way to get away from risk. We have risk today. If we don't hit our 7% this year in PRIT, if say it only returns 3%, well, then they recalculate this thing every 2 years. And this is the year they're recalculating. So one point we were paying 14% more a year for 2 years. This is 4 or 5 years ago. And then the recalculation by the state actuary got us down to the 9.2% increase. That's happening again this year. Who knows what the new increase will be? I would bet it'd probably still be in the 8 or 9% range.
Decrease.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. So for me, it's like the difference between an adjustable rate mortgage and a fixed rate mortgage. Even though it's not really a mortgage in the sense that we're not going up every year 9.2% because of interest rates. We're going up because that we're so far behind, it has to go up at that rate, which makes it like an adjustable rate mortgage where every year your payment's going to go up 9%. For me, the way I've looked at this is it's like a fixed rate mortgage. If you had an adjustable rate mortgage on your house and was going up 9% a year, you would probably be looking at a fixed rate mortgage to see what you could do to level your payments. And I think the risk of staying with this, there's no good solution. I mean, there's just no good solution. It's any solution we come up with, has all kinds of risk and downsides to it. But the downside of this situation we're on is it's going to be 9% more what they just tell you, 56 million. Next year, it'll be 64 or roughly. Like following year, it'll be 70. And those numbers impact our ability to fund other things in the city. That's coming right out of the budget. And it's uncontrollable, really, unless we did something along the lines of the pension obligation bonds. So, and I guess, so my third point is that if we authorize them, if we have 9 votes to authorize them, they're going to go look at it and take it to the, to the 9th inning or to the 1 yard line, whatever analogy you want to use, and then come back to us and assess things at that point, whether they want to go forward, whether the mayor, TJ, Lindsay, Pat, the finance team thinks it's prudent to go forward. And the state requires a 2.5% spread on this. So if we're borrowing money at 4 1/4, if the bond is at 4 1/4, we have to make at least 6.75 or it won't get approved by the state anyway. And so I've just looked at this as some point, this is probably our best thing to do. I don't know if it's the best thing now, but it's we have momentum of looking at it and authorizing them to continue looking at it. And then if we don't pull, I hate that term, pull a trigger, but if we don't decide to go forward at this point, we would have done all this analysis, which would position us for when interest rates are more favorable if we decide to wait.
All right, so I'm gonna say 2 comments if I may, Councilor Walsh, and then I'll pass it right over to you. We're not just risking $2 million, $3 million, it's $755 million that we're putting into this account. So that's not a small amount. That's a thing that we need to be looking at. It's just not like we're just putting money there. I was unaware that we were in a situation that we had to put this investment in the state funds because I know other communities that don't. But we got to be very cautious with 755 million now. I know that our pension obligations will increase over the years, but we do have more money that we can put toward the pension to reduce the principal. Right now, we just got $42 million from, what you brought in from Eversource. And then we do have some free cash right now where we could reduce the pension obligation so we don't have to pay that high of an interest rate next year. So we do come across funds along the way that we can use to reduce the payments from increasing each year, because if you're paying down the principal, you're paying down the interest payments. So I wanted to say that it's not like we don't have any other choices. We do, because we could have definitely used the money that we gave to 31 Elm Street to reduce the pension obligation, but we decided not to do that and give the rich people more money. So we have other options. We just have to be creative on how we do things. So I just wanted to say those couple of points. Councilor Walsh?
Thank you, and thank you for having this meeting. It's helpful. And Pat, thank you for your report. You put a lot of things in perspective, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. The reason that we're looking at the pension obligation bond is the concern about the interest rates going up. Is that why we're here?
We saw an opportunity where we could fund our pension and take some needed pressure off of the budget. And this was a strategy that we were looking at, whereas we would borrow this money and then the principal and interest payments would be less than the yearly payment that we're making per PARAC, per the Springfield Retirement Board with our adopted funding schedule. So really, as Councilor Allen pointed out, what we're trying to do is to earn more money than the interest we're paying. So in a perfect world, if we could have borrowed at 3% and then we earned 7% in the system, that would be a spread of 4%. Now, the last point we could go to is 2.5%, but what we'd like is 3% or something along those lines. So what we're doing is we're borrowing money and then putting it into the retirement system and then investing that with the state and hoping that we can outperform the interest that we would pay for the debt itself on the bonds. So it's a strategy to save money and to free up some much needed relief on the budget, not only for next year, but going out to 2033, 2034. So that was the plan. That's when we put the team together. And we're at a point now where we're asking the council to authorize the debt. And I understand it's a monumental decision. It's asking for $755 million, a lot of money, 7 times the cost of a school that we'd normally ask for. But it's a strategy that we went through with our financial advisors, with actuaries, with our external auditors, and we wanted to take a look at it and tackle a problem that's something that we've been worried about for as long as I've been on the retirement board. So it's a strategy. Is it perfect? No, but we've gotten this far and we'd like to take it to the end and then make the final decision. So,
and I do, from reading and listening, there does seem to be a consensus that there will be definitely an increase coming towards us. Is there,
Definitely, what do you mean by definitely, Counselor Walsh? Because nothing here is definite. Nothing. There's no definite amount
there
that,
is consensus that the Fed is going to increase the rates?
oh, that the Fed's gonna increase the rates, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And
So-
by the way, it looks like that meeting is tomorrow, by the way. I just looked it up.
Pat,
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
yeah, okay, I don't blame you. This is monumental.
Mm,
Is there an interest rate that you wouldn't accept? I mean, you're talking about what, 4.25 best case scenario, but is there one that you wouldn't accept?
Yes, I mean, we're willing to walk away if it creeps up to a point where we're not comfortable. So what we have now, what we receive from our financial advisors takes into consideration that the feds are going to raise the rates this week. So they're saying it could be between 4.5% or 4.75%. And at that point, we're very close to that 2.5% spread that the state is mandating anyways, so they won't allow us to go forward. So in a perfect world, as I was saying, I wish this interest rate was 3% or 3.5%. So with the way the interest rates have crept up, it's made this a difficult decision that much more difficult, is probably the best way I can put it.
Well, I don't know anything about a perfect world. I don't think I live in one. But what do we say to our retirees? Because I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions that this is really for their benefit. It protects what they have now.
Yes, what it does is it's going to add to our assets if we do sell the bonds. But we have a commitment per Chapter 32 of Mass General Law. We have to fund our retirement system. We've made a promise to the retirees. I'm on the retirement board. I'm going to hold the city with my other hat. I'm going to hold the cities accountable for what needs to be paid. So we adopt that funding schedule. The city agrees to it. The Water and Sewer Commission agrees to it, and the Housing Authority agrees to it. So we're going to pay our retirees. And that there's no doubt about that. This is a strategy to pay our retirees and also save some money budgetarily. Is it without risk? No, it's not. And as these interest rates creep up, it gets less and less desirable. So.
Well, I just want to end my comments by saying, you know, I've been on the council a while, and I have always said, Pat, you are somebody that's fair and believable and would never give us bad advice. So I think we're very fortunate to have you on the retirement board and on this bond committee. And I respect your advice.
Thank you. I would never, I can't say I would never give you bad advice, but it certainly wouldn't be on purpose. It would be something accidental. So
a mistake of the heart, not the mind.
right, exactly.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that. Like Pat, even when we work together, you're definitely a trustworthy stand-up type of guy that I definitely trust, but I still don't agree with this. I'm sorry.
I respect your opinion.
Yeah, we haven't had any communications with the city, with the constituents to see how they feel about it. I have. They're like, oh, the city's gonna risk our money, they're gambling with our money, I have, and we haven't looked at other scenarios. And I'm like, can we put in less than the 755 million, maybe half, get our pension liability up some, maybe not all the way to fully funding it, but get it up some. Why we gotta go all the way? Because we're last in the Commonwealth with funding our pension obligation. Now we got to scramble and fully fund it. I think that we could have got a scenario where we're putting in 500 million or something like that. You know, I might be more willing to do something like that, but it's just like all or nothing. And we got the information late again. Maybe Tim got it throughout the process, but the whole council certainly did not. And to me, it was a little rushed. It was late. If it wasn't for the Rule 20 call, it probably would have passed without even getting any more or even getting all the scenarios that you gave to us, Pat, which I'm grateful for. You did that in a really, really quick turnaround time. But is very uncomfortable for me, and probably because I lived it and others didn't at the time when we had to pay our pension obligations. So we had to lay off. We had to pay our bond obligation. I'm gonna say that, not pension, our bond, also pension, and people got laid off. And it's always the lower level people that probably need their checks. I know everybody need their money and their payments, but you know, they live in paycheck to paycheck. And they was me. They was me. So I just got my own personal feelings about it. And I think that is a fiscally irresponsible thing to do right now if we know we're heading into a recession, because we're not heading out of one because we're not in one. So it's only one other way to go. And that's kind of like downhill. So I'm just gonna leave that there. Tim, you'll have the final say on this, and then we'll move on to the rest of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to point out, it's just an authorization to 755. It could end up to be 100 million, could end up to be 200 or 400. It's just an authorization that in case things were favorable and it really looked good, that we can authorize them to, or all of us, to be part of 755. But there have been a lot of times people just say, maybe we'll just do 300 or 400. Well, we wouldn't do any if we don't have that spread. So we're just voting on an authorization, not on an actual financial move yet.
Thank you for saying that, Tim. I wish we could still just vote on a lesser amount. That would make me feel a little bit more comfortable, but it is what it is. The scenarios as presented, and councilors just have to vote their heart and what they feel is the right thing to do, I guess, at the end of the day. So we're gonna move on from that and go to, I wanted to go to the law department's item on the agenda. And that is the expenditure report for the law department. So I don't know, Pat, if you have it to pull up, and or Lisa, who wants to speak to it.
Do you want me to talk about this month?
Yes, I'm trying to pull up.
Yeah, no, I got it up, Pat. So this month in March, we spent from those funds $300,233. That represented one new settlement, which I had talked to you folks about at last month because it had happened, but we hadn't written the check yet. And that was for $290,000. That was one of the juveniles from Palmer, the second juvenile from Palmer. There was a third juvenile that we got a notice of claim from, but they have never brought suit. The rest of the funds, the largest amount was just slightly less than $8,800 for outside counsel who was working on the Vigno case. The rest were various stenographic services. There's also a reimbursement to me in the amount of $69, which was the amount that I paid for copies of a case that we transferred from state court to federal court. We also had to write a check to state court, and also in the same case to transfer it out of state court and into federal court. So if anybody has any questions. Oh, and the other figure that I should bring to the attention is that following these payments, so the total that have been spent out of that 5 million is $891,921.65, and remaining at the end of March is $4,108,078.35. There have been 2 additional settlements since March. I'm not sure if they'll show up next week or the week after. And not next month or the month after.
What's the Vigno case? Can you remind us of that?
That's the case of one of the officers who was in Palmer who brought a whistleblower claim against us and against a lot of other officers. It's been pending in Superior Court. It's essentially an employment case. And It was scheduled to begin trial on June 11th. That's the case July 11th. I don't know why I keep mixing up months. And that's the case that Doherty Wallace was brought in to assist on.
Okay. All right, thank you. Counselor Allen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, Lisa, thanks for the report. Is this 300,000 or 290, this one big settlement that's in this report? Is that the last of the Palmer ones? And was that liability, was that against us or was it against the state police? I thought I heard something, some confusion on that. So could you straighten us out on that?
Sure. It's the last Palmer case that was filed. As I said, we did get a notice of claim from a third juvenile, but they have never brought suit. But
Okay.
I don't know exactly how old that kid was at the time of Palmer. And further complicating that is that during COVID, statute of limitations were told. So usually you have 3 years to bring these types of cases, but the statute of limitations was told for about 5 months. So that adds 5 months onto everybody's statute of limitations for any claims that were pending during that time. So we haven't had suit brought yet on that. But I did at one point the city did at one point get a notice of claim. There was also a claim against the state police. The state police claim arose out of there was a state police dog that intercepted this juvenile, and there was some resulting injuries. After the city settled with the juvenile, it's my understanding that the juvenile and his attorney decided to drop the case against the state police.
So the settlement that we paid was truly our liability and not the state police liability.
That's correct.
And so the state police had the dog that injured the kid. What did we do? Was this just the big violation kind of thing?
So, I mean, the settlement doesn't indicate that we did anything. It was a disputed claim, and I want to be clear on that. There were allegations that there was excessive force.
Okay, thank you.
The settlement itself doesn't suggest, no settlement is proof or nor is it an admission of liability by the city or any of the named parties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All
Any
set.
other questions for Attorney D'Souza? All right, seeing none, we'll go to item number 2, order authorizing expenditure of FY23 Chapter 90 funds for $3,638,824. And that's DPW, so I will turn it over to Chris.
Good evening, counselors. I'll take items 2 and 3 together.
Sure.
We received notice back in February of the state's intent to put $200 million again statewide into the Chapter 90 program. That number has been the same number for probably the past 8 years. The city's receiving $3.638 million. And as part of that $3.38 million, we're using roughly 2.8 of it for our paving program, 100,000 of it for traffic signal work, 150,000 for crack sealing, and about $600,000 set aside for design projects that we do for Mass DOT. Separately, the governor put together a budget amendment for fiscal year 22 that put $100 million into it. So the city is receiving $1.481 million for that. And as part of the packet that we submitted to the city council for both of those items, we provided a list of all the paving projects that are going to be advertised within the next week or so. One of the bids is for $2.8 million of Chapter 90 funds, with $1.3 million worth of the winter repair funds, which is what that $100 million is. And then we also have about $1.3 million in bond work that is primarily private ways that we are paving in the city. So we're doing about $5.5 million worth of paving this year, which is roughly about 9 miles of paving in the city. And that advertisement is going out the next week. So between the Chapter 90 money and what's called the winter road repair, otherwise known as RAP, it was in the governor's supplemental budget for fiscal 22. So between fiscal 22 and the bond money, once we get that out to bid, we will be starting that work right away.
That's great. And usually someone from the council's asked for the list. So if you can just send that to the council, because we don't have time to like go over it today.
Yeah, it was in the packet that was sent.
Oh, it was in the packet.
It's in the
Okay.
packet. Yep.
All right. I know what it was, so I didn't look at the packet. You usually are fair. Usually
Yeah,
are
we
fair.
spread
with
it out. We try to spread it out in all the
pave the road,
areas.
so I didn't even look at the packet because I knew
Yep.
what it was.
I can
all
go
right, thank
through it at the meeting if there's any questions.
Sure. Any questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Authorization, FY22 automated external defibrillator equipment program grant. Did I miss one? No, that's what it is.
Sure, thank you, Counselor. I'll take this one. This is for the fire department. It is the first time we are receiving this grant, and it is for the purchase of an AED.
Okay. AED, all right. It's 2,500. Budget transfer within the department, 45,000 for fire, gas, and diesel. Lindsay?
Yes, so let me pull up that one. For 20. Okay, so this is for the fire department, using their salary and wages surplus to move over to their gasoline and diesel line for the remainder of the fiscal year.
Thank you. Building code is small, 6,000. I'm gonna pass that one and go to the free cash comptroller that Pat kind of talked about. It was for the Medicaid budget transfer, right, Pat? Because something went up. Can you tell me what went up again?
Yeah, so the revenue collected by UMass, which is our outside vendor for Medicaid collection, they actually collected more revenue than we estimated in the FY22 budget process. And that's when we come up with the payment for them for the annual payment. So if they collect more revenue during that time, we have to pay them more. So this is us just coming to get some more money to pay them.
Now, why do we got to pay them at all?
Because they're the outside vendor that does those services for us. For the
Oh, they collect certain amount. Oh, they collect the payments for us and we
they
pay
do.
them.
They I think they help with the, Pat, do you know exactly what they do?
Yes, they actually do the billing on our behalf. So they're
the
experts in that. So we pay them a 2.5% commission for that.
Gotcha, it's commission,
And,
okay.
we used to have a different third-party consultant years ago, and they were actually paid 5%. So this has been a very good relationship between the city and UMass Medical School for this service.
Thank you very much, thank you. The budget transfer within the department of 85,000 for law professional services budget.
Yes. 18. Okay, so this is another transfer in the department, and they're moving money from their salaries and wages line actually to move over to their professional services line, because they do need increased costs for outside counsel due to their staffing levels right now. So this is projected to get them through the remainder of the fiscal year.
And it's from salary and wages?
Correct.
All right. Free cash to veterans.
Yes, so this is due to actually an increase in the salary of one of the employees in the department, along with the settlement of the UPSU contract, which the majority of the employees are in.
Okay. And then free cash at 311?
Same.
Same.
Not,
The up to?
yeah, for UPSU, yeah.
Okay, for up to. All right. I think we made it. I
Now,
know there's.
I don't know if
there's
I should bring
donation
this
for
up.
200, but go ahead, bring it up.
There's two things that are not on here, which are transfers from free cash to DPW. And I don't know how they didn't make it on the finance committee agenda. Items number 16 and 17 on the regular agenda are transfers from free cash to DPW.
And how much is it?
Well, $700,000 is the first one.
For
And that is, and I wish Chris was still here. So that is due to an increased tipping fee. It's a whole story that he can explain to you.
Yeah.
We are getting revenue that's going to make up the additional costs. So we're getting unexpected revenue this year. It's going to
from like
affect
recycling or something?
you know, I don't know the
Okay.
details. And I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Okay.
And then the 190 is actually, we had a couple employees who initially were budgeted against Chapter 90, and Chapter 90 doesn't allow employee salaries anymore.
Okay.
And then also they did have a couple union settlements in their department, and that's what that's for.
Okay.
They don't
Tim?
have the salary savings to cover it in their department, so we do have to use an outside funding source.
Gotcha. We got 2 minutes because we do have public speak out. So Tim, if your question.
Thank you. Yeah, my question, Lindsay, is, we're using free cash for about 100,000, 120,000 or something. Normally, I'm not suggesting we should be taking more out of free cash, but normally those kind of size things, we try to move things around in the budget. Is there a reason that we not have any room in the budget to do that? Or is there a reason that you're using free cash that I'm not aware of?
Well, for the DPW ones, it was just cleaner to do it from one funding source. And they don't have surplus savings like the other departments to move over. As of right now, our reserve for contingencies would not be enough money to move over to cover those additional expenses for his department. We don't have much left in reserve for contingency right now.
So coming on the end of the year, we've almost spent all of that.
Yeah, we did. We had a couple transfers already for parks and facilities, for snow and gas and gasoline and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and end the finance subcommittee meeting, and we will see you guys in a little while.
Thank you.
Thank you. All righty.